This is called Progressive Activist Speaks Out Against Woke Madness, Brianna Wu. I tend to agree with Brianna Wu on this particular thing, but not a whole lot else, is what I find. We're like politically similar. We're both like liberal, but yeah, we'll see. Maybe this will make me think more favorably of her, considering there aren't many of these figures out there that are even saying this kind of stuff, and it needs to be said when it comes to the TRA stuff. But yeah, let's see.
I used to think you were completely full of shit when you talked about cancel culture, and now they've run this playbook on me. The fact that the progressive fringe is now standing with the literal fucking terrorists, like, what the hell are we thinking? Look at what we're doing.
You probably figured this out already, but the parts you were taught are a burden about you. That's what people want from you. The messy bits, the unformed, the...
Doing with the trans children debate. What...
Yeah, they really... there's a similarity. It's in the way they talk. I'm not saying she's similar to Jeffrey Marsh. I'm not calling her a man.
I used to think you were completely full of shit when you talked about cancel culture, and now they've run this playbook on me. The fact that the progressive fringe is now standing with the literal fucking terrorists, like, what the hell are we thinking?
Yeah, so she is like rabidly pro-Israel. I keep very neutral on this because I'm thousands of miles away. I don't have any kind of platform or voice. I'm not doing anything about Israel or Palestine, realistically.
Look at what we're doing with the trans children debate. What is the progressive left's answer to any parent that has a question on any of that? It is
that they're bigots. What else is it going to be? You don't want teachers convincing your kids that maybe they're actually trans behind your back and then never tell you about it? That's bigotry, surely.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, basically. They do that with detransitioners as well. I don't know if she's going to mention detransitioners, but they're very selective about which ones they'll talk to and talk about. And any of the ones that are bad, aka any of the ones that have like regrets, they just get painted as like alt-right, usually because only the right wing will talk to them. And yeah, it sucks because they're like victims of our culture that says it's okay or maybe even good to be trans, and it wasn't for them. And we should be trying to reduce that as much as possible, but we won't even give these people the time of day, so I don't see that happening anytime soon, personally.
Got to move back to science and back to reality. People perceive progressives as assholes. A decade ago, during Gamergate, people thought the white male gamers were the assholes. I've got news for you. Today, it's trans Twitter, it's socialist Twitter, it's...
They weren't perfect back in Gamergate. She's going to mention Gamergate a lot, because that's just half of the course. But yeah, I don't know. Gamergate seemed like it was fucked on both ends. It got made out to be a harassment campaign instead of something to do with video game journalism, ethics thereof, you know. That's kind of the playbook. And she was part of it. I don't know how much... What am I trying to say here? I don't know how much accountability she's going to take. Because with the careful stuff, it felt like she didn't take accountability, even though she could have learned a long time ago, rather than just recently when Mutahar makes a video that Careful's was bad news and that we shouldn't be associating with her, and we shouldn't have lifted her up the way we did.
It's terrorist sympathizer Twitter. It's us.
Brianna, well, welcome to Trigonometry. We've been working on this interview. We've got a bunch of questions to ask you, but first of all, lots of people told you not to come on the show.
Oh my God. I announced this, what was it, 2 days ago? And my DMs...
Oh, don't talk to them. They're Nazis. They're fascists.
Have been nothing but people calling you transphobes and Nazis and racists. And I'm always like, can you show me a clip of what they've said to like make you feel that way? It's always the most silly thing. It is, I don't know. It's like
just
no one
me doing a Hitler salute.
Yes, exactly that.
Silly stuff
the
like
KKK
that.
costume, I think, was a little much.
It was
maybe.
a nice party.
Yeah.
What can you say? But anyway, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. I've been following a lot of the things you've been saying recently, and it was very interesting for us to get you on the show to talk about them, because I don't know if you saw, I wrote an article very shortly after October 7th for the Free Press called The Day the Delusions Died.
Wow.
And my argument...
Oh, we're actually going to go into some Israel-Palestine stuff. I'm pretty much neutral. I don't like what Israel's doing. A lot of potential excess deaths. But, I don't know. I see both sides. If that makes me a cuck on this issue, then fucking so be it, because pro-Palestine and pro-Israel Twitters on the extreme ends are the most insane, deranged fucking shit ever. And it's all fucking white people pretty much from the US, so no one even there personally.
Was that I thought that it was no longer possible for a lot of good people on the left to pretend that the extremes of the left were not going off the rails.
Yeah.
And you are someone who is outright progressive,
Yep.
Democrat progressive,
Yep.
raising money to fight Trump and all
My
the rest
literal job is to get Democrats elected.
Right.
I said
Like,
earlier,
I'm on the
oh
team.
God,
Yes,
why do I
you're
do
on the
these
team.
things?
And I see you now being one of the very few people who's
I said earlier we're like politically similar. I'm probably actually right of her, if anything.
willing to stand up against the anti-Semitic extremes on your own side. Not just anti-Semitic, but there's also large elements of anti-whiteness and all
Sure.
sorts of other stuff going
Yeah.
on there. So why have you suddenly taken this position?
I think the better question is, where the hell is everyone else? This is the most obvious.
Anti-white racism is real, by the way. Just accept it. It's easier. It's easier at this point. Trans people, not even trans people, just like the left seems to fucking hate white people, especially white men. We have very little to say to them, so now they're all going conservative. It's to be expected, because we don't see any point in appealing to them when they're one of the biggest groups in countries like the US or this country.
Moral position in the entire world to take. Like Hamas, these are not good people. Hezbollah, the Houthis, these are not good.
Queers for Palestine. Oh my god. What's hilarious to me, these Queers for Palestine types, like you'll constantly get people, if you agree with anything a gender critical says and you're trans, or if you're even just kind of conversing with them and, not being an asshole, they're all saying this shit like, oh, they won't spare you, as if there's some reality where in 5 years or something, I'm going to be up against a wall in front of a firing squad. Which is insane. It's complete fabrication. I'm not going to be on the fucking wall because they'd have to find me first. But, like, the point is, when it comes to, like, the Queers for Palestine shit, people say the same thing about them, being pro fairly conservative Islam, which is not pro-queer. You know what I'm saying? And suddenly that's fine. It's just the people that are cozying up to GCs that are the problem, I guess. So it's completely inconsistent in my opinion. But yeah, like, if they actually went to Palestine, like, I think it'd be a bit different to what they expect. The other thing is, I always wonder, like, let's say that a two-state solution is achieved and there's relative peace, the Palestinians do get their own part of the land or whatever. I wonder when we're going to start hearing about, like, anti-gay atrocities or something, because it might not happen. Maybe they'll be different to what you expect. But conservative Islam is like a certain way. There's no really getting away. There's no real way of getting around that.
Good people. So the fact that the progressive fringe is now standing with the literal fucking terrorists, like, what the hell are we thinking? This is not very difficult. So
Considering how radical they are, I don't actually find it very surprising that they're pro-terrorist. I think they probably want to have a cause like that they can be terrorists for, personally.
So for me, it's really been a realization, because there have been so many things over the last decade that I've just shut my mouth about and I've gone along with. And it's really at a point now where it's gut check time. This is principles time. Whose team are you on? Are you on team democracy, or are you on team burn everything down? And it's been really disillusioning to see just how few people on my own side have principles. I always thought that what we were doing was about making the world better. And it's been very eye-opening to see it's actually about personal power.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question that will sort of sound a little bit like an I told you so or anything, but it's not intended in that
Sure.
way. I guess a lot of people who are in our position, Francis and I both always thought of ourselves as liberal and on the left, and we worked in a very progressive comedy industry in the UK. And what happened with us is we said what you're saying now
Right.
6 years ago.
Yeah.
And we became, Nazi terror.
And to
far
be
right.
fair, I was part of the crowd that was shouting you down and calling you those names.
Right.
I'm sorry.
No, well, you weren't
Yeah.
shouting me down personally, but
Hey, an apology. That's something. I might come out with this with a more favorable view of Brianna than what I did last time. Who knows?
I'm talking about people
yeah.
like you saying that stuff.
Right. So I guess I'm curious what you think is going to happen, first of all, with you now, because it's sort of the way it has happened today is anyone who was willing to challenge that fringe that you're talking about, which is anti-Western, it's anti-male, it's anti-white, it's
That's right.
anti-Jewish, etc., would say what you're saying, what we've been saying for years, and they would immediately become evil, right-wing, Nazi, far-right, etc. And that's kind of it. And no one else would stand up and say anything.
That's right.
As has happened. So what are you expecting to happen?
Well, I've lost more friends than I can count, right? So I'm very much trying to make.
Yeah, that's what happens when you go against the majority. Unfortunately, I have almost no trans friends left because I say things like I use my free speech to say something other than what literally every single other person is saying.
New friends. I think the long-term path of this is progressivism and socialism in the United States. It's a cultural dead end. This is not going to go anywhere. There's no universe where like progressives win power and manage to get a ton of congressional seats.
This is true. They actually got much closer to that in the UK with Jeremy Corbyn, and I was like very on board with Jeremy Corbyn at the time. I don't know. I'd have to look now to see if I still would be, because it didn't seem like full socialism or whatever. Full socialism is not going to happen in these like Western countries, and if it does, it's a long, long way away, because no one actually wants it, and you're not having a revolution, so it's like, well, I guess we'll just LARP on the internet then. But they don't seem to want power. It seems to be this exclusive club that all the cool people get to belong to, and they get to just shit on literally everyone else, because even if you're a lib, you get plenty of hate from the far left.
And pass the legislation that I believe in. It has devolved into, exactly as you say, a bunch of culture war nonsense that is not about policy, and now literally siding with terrorists. So
that's another thing. What like responsibility do those of us that perpetuate the culture war from the trans side, what like responsibility do we have for this ongoing culture war? Because it seems like there's not much It seems like there's not much compromise on either side. And you can't just be like, well, the other side have done this, where it's like, well, both of you are doing bad things, so like, who's going to be the bigger boy? It reminds me of when I was a letting agent, and I'd have to literally tell people, adult humans, much older than me in some cases, that two wrongs don't make a right, and that if you're going to withdraw rent against your agreement because a doorknob was slightly loose, then that's a bit insane, you know. It doesn't, if they're refusing to do a repair, it doesn't make that a good thing. Say it's something a bit more significant than that. But it's still a case of two wrongs don't make a right. And far too many people were apparently never told this as a kid.
I've had so many conversations with friends about this, because every single progressive activist that I know is really frustrated with this destructive tendency that we have. And all of us are going, what can we do? Your industry has audience capture, where you kind of get into a lane and you can't challenge your own audience because your numbers will drop. I think in the progressive space, there's very much the same thing, where there's this tendency to go lefter and lefter and lefter and lefter. And now we're in a...
Yeah, we get into these bubbles. We don't talk to people we disagree with anymore. Most people seem not to. I say most people, this is more of an internet thing. But the internet shit is becoming more and more like... It's becoming more pervasive into real life. Like, I meet so many trans people nowadays, most of them seemingly, that seem very similar to the kinds of people that I'd come across on like Twitter or something. And that's weird. For years and years, I've been having these thoughts about how fucked everything is, including our own side, and including the shit that we do, pro-trans. But I always kind of wrote it off as like, well, it's just crazies on the internet. But like, I can't do that anymore, because it's like real life now too. But yeah, we get into bubbles, we get weirder and weirder and weirder. It happens on the right, it happens on the left. Here's what it is.
point where we can't even say things like trans women don't have periods without people getting really upset about that. Look at my mention.
Yeah, trans women being born male is such a huge fucking taboo. Like, we can't... Doesn't it seem like we're all about, like, busting taboos until suddenly it's what sex was someone born when they're trans, and then suddenly the taboo is the most, like, necessary thing ever. It's interesting.
Literally right now. So someone's got to stand up and go, this is not right. This is crazy town. I didn't get into progressive politics to talk about trans women having periods. I got into progressive politics to pass fucking healthcare. So we're either serious about course correcting on this cultural dead end, or Donald Trump and MAGA are going to win everything, and the pain for the Democratic Party is going.
I don't know if I think that progressives are going to have that much of a, what am I trying to say? I don't know if they're going to have that much of an impact on whether people are voting Trump or not. Maybe. I mean, it seems like the progressives don't want to vote for Biden either. And, like, that's quite a common thing on the pro-Palestine thing as well. So potentially you could lay some blame. I don't know. The way she's putting it, I guess she probably knows this kind of shit, but yeah.
Going to be extreme. We've got to start talking more to people in the middle, and we need to be reaching out to sane Republicans, in my view.
Brianna, don't you think part of the problem is when it comes... Look...
What she said was a really good point, and there's a reason why people on the trans side need to stop shitting on people like Blair White. Even if you don't like the things she says, she reaches a completely different group of people than what the trans left do, because no right-wing person is going to listen to the trans left. Like, that's just not really going to happen. Not if their beliefs are as, like, died into them as many people's are these days. So, like, someone like Blair White should, like, be celebrated, because she's talking to the kinds of people that the trans left doesn't want to talk to anyway, but instead she gets, like, completely shat on and, like, smeared constantly. There's plenty of stuff I don't agree with Blair White on, but I certainly don't think she's this grifter and all this other shit that people constantly say about her. Like, I've done a video recently about that kind of thing, like someone reacting to her, and it's all the complete bullshit stuff. Like, in, like, less than a minute, we've got, like, pick me and grifter and all this kind of shit. It's really pathetic, and that's the point. We didn't integrate all different points of view into the trans activism stuff. It's just one point of view that not everyone shares, and of course that's going to build resentment when people who don't share that get pushed away and feel like they can't do anything because they're being rejected by their own side.
And both sides suffer with this, but I think the left suffer with this more. It's this purity ritual that you have. You are not left.
Yes, this is true. This is very true. Completely true. Purity testing, all that shit, to the point where you follow someone on Twitter, therefore you must be a far-righter or a Nazi or a transphobe or any of that shit. It's a way to not engage, basically. I don't think most of these people have many arguments. I think they just get a lot of what they believe from other people. They probably don't know why they believe a lot of the stuff they do. When you start thinking about why you actually believe something and why you're on whichever side you're on, what you end up coming up with can be interesting. And it can actually end up pushing you away from that shit. Because me moving away from the left was as a direct result of actually listening to left-wingers talk a bit more, pay more close attention. And especially when they talk to people they disagree with, especially more mildly. And also the way they talk about people they disagree with. Like, it's extremely telling the way people talk about, like, how a left-winger talks about conservatives, for example. It's extremely telling the way they talk about these people.
Unless you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, da, 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 da. And all of a sudden, the moment you challenge one of those tenets, you're out.
That's exactly right.
It's completely true. And the sooner we start acknowledging that, the better.
I mean, again, look at my mention. She can see this firsthand. It's not enough to, like, I am as progressive as you can get. Universal health care. I want structural solutions to heal this gaping wound of racism that's existed in our country since slavery. You know, name a progressive policy. I'm very much in favor of it. But when it comes to the optics, right, we've got to start having more serious conversations about how people perceive us. People perceive progressives as assholes. Mm-hmm. That's just the truth. A decade ago during Gamergate, people thought the white male gamers were the assholes. I've got news for you. Today, it's trans Twitter, it's socialist Twitter, it's terrorist sympathizer Twitter. It's us. We're the ones doxing people. We're the ones sending death threats.
I still maintain it's more of a both sides thing, but she's completely right, and people need to accept it. It's true. I go on about the way people behave and the way people talk to people for extremely minor, like, infractions. And it's true, like, can you imagine someone who's, like, new to being trans, like, comes into these spaces and immediately gets shat on by everyone? Like, what's that gonna make that person do? It's insane. And we don't seem to be able to understand the way we behave is, like, completely toxic and completely cancerous to anything we want to achieve.
We're canceling everyone in sight. And at the end of the day, people are not going to trust assholes with power. I'm sorry, it's just the truth.
And you said at the start of this conversation something that I found very interesting. You basically said that you had reservations about things that had happened before
Yes.
October 7th. What were those things that you shut your mouth over? And the second part of that question is, do you regret it now, seeing what it's become?
I definitely do. So let me give you a really specific example. When I was running for Congress in 2018, right, you had the Women's March, and you had elements of the Women's March that were out there with this pro-Palestine, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic nonsense. One
thing I want to kind of touch on very quickly, I kind of was critical of how much she, like, rambles and she tells stories. It's not really that I have a problem with the way she tells stories and stuff. It's more the way she was doing it with that Queeman conversation in particular seemed kind of inappropriate for the kind of discussion they were having. Like, something like this is absolutely fine. They're asking quite open-ended questions and inviting her to expand. She's fairly likable, honestly. In that particular instance that I watched before, she wasn't, because it didn't seem like she adapted very much, and I would have struggled in the same circumstance if I was, like, grilling someone and they were, like, constantly, well, you know, back in 2008 or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. That's not a problem I have with her specifically. It's something that I mentioned because of that. So
very anti-Israel and veering into the most anti-Semitic language that you could possibly have. That was wrong. I made the decision to keep my mouth shut, which was a tremendous error in judgment. And because people like me.
You know, I've kept my mouth shut over so much shit, like even small shit. Like, I'd watch my friends falling down the most brain-rot fucking rabbit holes of, like, I have friends that were musicians that were all saying, like, oh, we should be paid minimum wage to be a musician, and then musicians want extra income, they can get a job as well, which is fucking batshit. As if there's not enough music out there to start with, largely made by not particularly talented people. Yeah, I don't know. I felt like I've enabled at least some of this, like, this race to the bottom, because I didn't say, you know, hey, that's kind of mental, which I probably should have. And that's just one example. There's so many things, like the kind of a crazy shit that so many people I knew, or I either know or knew, believe.
Me shut up in those years, it kept getting worse. And those seeds.
What's going on with her hair? I hope she fixes it, or they stop using that camera angle.
Kept growing, and now it's basically taken over the entire progressive movement. I don't know if it can be saved in time. And you can go into any number of issues, like, you know, self-ID with trans people, or, you know, I remember during Gamergate, you know, there was this expansionist thing that it wasn't enough to talk about the number of women we were hiring in the game industry. You know, now we had to obliterate whiteness as something that we were featuring in games. And I'm like, it's a little bit extreme, but we'll go along with it. So it was just one more step after another. And now it's 10 years later. Look at where we are. We are completely unelectable. This strategy is failing.
I have to point out that she was decently older than me when Gamergate was going on. She was like 37 or something, I guess. I don't know her age exactly. I think she's about 47 now. But there's definitely an argument that she was old enough to know better. I guess it was unprecedented. It's hard. Personally, I think she was old enough to know better.
I suppose the question that I'm curious about, and I hear people on left and right saying this often, and I don't understand why they say it. So, and you did say it, so I'm curious to explore this. You called the culture war nonsense.
It is.
Well, you say it is, and I suppose it depends. What exactly do you mean by that, first of all, before I jump in with my opinion?
We have different jobs, right? You are a public advocate and a public figure, and you have a very specific agenda that is pro-free speech, one I agree with. But my job is different. My job is public policy. My job is to get candidates elected, and my job is to back-channel specific bills to get them passed.
I'm guessing examples of this kind of stuff was, we've got Rebellion Pack, and she's run for Congress. Yeah, because she was involved with Progressive Victory as well. I don't think she is currently... Anyway, let's keep going.
Right. So in my view, as soon as you get something like family medical leave and you turn it into a right versus left culture war, you have automatically lost the conversation.
No, I agree with you about it. I guess the reason I ask you, Bran, is that the way I see what's going on, and I'll lay it out for you the way that I see it, and you feel free to pick away at it, challenge, whatever, is here's my conception of the culture war as it happens. I feel that there is a determined, organized attempt to undermine the basic building blocks of our civilization.
Yes.
And those of us who are willing to A, see that, and B, say something about it, are called culture warriors. That's what people say about me, for example. Oh, he's just a culture warrior. And my view is, our culture is really important. Our culture is why we are where we are. Our culture is why we're successful. Our culture is why our civilization is rich and powerful and dominant around the world.
Sure.
Because of our culture.
Yeah.
So if people on the progressive left, and it is people on the progressive left, there are some on the right now too, in response, I think. If there are people who want to say that those building blocks are evil or wrong or bad, I think it's important to push back against that and to prevent them from succeeding.
Yeah.
That's how I see the culture war. So to me,
does it not depend on what it is and what effect it's having? Maybe. I don't know. I completely agree with what he's saying. But I do see what he's saying. And it's definitely, depending on the circumstance, some of it's definitely correct. Depending on what the specific action is, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I don't fucking know. I'm dying.
Me, defending our culture isn't nonsense. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if you're defining it that way, I'm 1,000% on board with you. I think there's a growing tendency on the progressive side to try to burn everything inside down. They're the mirror image of MAGA. They're accelerationist. They want to burn democracy, like our institutions, our news, everything in sight to the ground, right? They want to burn the idea of gender to the ground itself. This is not a way for a culture to survive. Like, they think the United...
Yeah, I mean, she's describing a very extreme position, but to try and pretend that there aren't people out there that do think this is pretty insane. I don't know who would be out there. You know, you'd have to have a vested interest in, like, protecting whatever the fuck it is these people are doing in order to say that this isn't at least somewhat true of the worst kinds of people. And, like, the culture war, does it not get perpetuated by both sides, you know? And often a huge problem is what we call transphobia. Like, we'll say that anyone fighting on the side of their culture or whatever, they must be, like, evil and bigoted and stuff. So it gets escalated straight away on that side. And pretty milquetoast points become, like, right-wing talking points. But it's because we made them right-wing talking points by refusing to acknowledge them. And then it gets to the point where actually people are saying some pretty crazy shit. And now it's like, oh, that's the culture war. It's like, before, the culture war was something a lot different to what we're saying it is now, I guess. Like, we make things much more extreme than they actually are in order to discredit them.
United States is the biggest evil in the world? Like, they just don't, do they not know what has happened in Syria over the last decade? Like, they just have so little information. So I fully agree with you there. What I'm saying is, if we are serious about public policy, it makes a lot of sense to stop treating everyone on the other fucking side like they're your enemy. We've got...
True. I had someone in his fucking 40s trying to lecture me on why I should see some people as my enemies and some people as my friends, and I just don't think that way. It's a really childish way of thinking, and I don't know where it comes from. I would like it to go away personally. It's a huge problem on Twitter, for sure.
Got to get buy-in from more people. I think my theory of change from here is I think there are a lot of Republicans and moderates out there that think that the corporations are screwing over normal people, and they will stand with you on policies that address their actual lives. They're not going to do that if they've got to pretend all this crazy stuff is true at the same time. We've got to get buy-in from them.
I think part of the problem, Brianna, and
This is true. By the way, this is happening here now. Shit, let me just remind myself.
Do that if they've got to pretend all this crazy actual lives. They're not going to do that.
Yeah. So there's going to be a lot of people. There's an election going on in my country, in the UK. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to complain that when Labour get into power, which is almost certainly going to happen, the Conservatives are not coming back. I think Reform are the right-wing party in this election. It's not Conservatives. And Reform are very, very divisive. I don't think they're going to get broad support because they're very conservative in certain ways. But yeah, when Labour doesn't really do a huge amount for trans people, because we're not much of the population, and because it doesn't really affect many people, it's not a popular issue for most people, because most people aren't trans, and most people don't know any trans people. So when Labour doesn't really do a huge amount about the trans thing, that's going to be like, oh, they're transphobic. It's already happening. They're transphobic. Like, all this, that, and the other. Like, don't vote for them. Like, what is the point, honestly, of our thing? We want, like, the Green Party to win. The Green Party's not gonna win. You know, we've got insane people trying to get elected on the Green Party ticket. There was this woman called Sophie Molly in Scotland, Scottish Greens, got kicked from the party for, like, shitting on J.K. Rowling on Twitter, calling her, like, a torn-faced cow or some shit. Like, just don't do that, you know? Have some professionalism. But it's like, I don't know. I don't know what we're for anymore. I don't know what the point of any of this is when everyone's like a socialist or an anarchist or a communist, and none of those things are going to happen in the UK. Maybe one day, years and years and years from now, who knows? But there's no will for, like, socialism, for example. People don't want it. When Jeremy Corbyn was the leader of the opposition, he went up against them a few times in elections, and it was very easy to play on people's fear of, like, socialism, because most people don't want it. Most people just want to be able to afford their shit. They're fine, like, working and stuff and providing for their family. And we don't have many normal perspectives in, like, the trans community, because almost none of us have kids. Almost none of us have lived kind of ordinary lives where we just meet someone and that's just kind of how it is. So we're not trying to be relatable. To me, I would like it to be more relatable. When I talk to people that seem a bit transphobic, often I can move them just by explaining things kind of simply and in a way that isn't dramatic and in a way that isn't, this shit is life or death for me, you know?
That if they've got to pretend all this crazy stuff is true at the same time. We've got to get buy-in from them.
I think part of the problem, Brianna, and look,
also, I've never spoken to an anarchist. Listen, I'm prepared for anyone to prove me wrong on this, but I've never met an anarchist or, like, listen to one talk and not just think this is, like, the most childish shit I've ever heard in my life. Like, watch Demon Mama, like, seriously. I don't know what these people are for. And they're often vague about it, so, like, great, okay. You're politically useless and I don't know what you think about anything because you won't tell me. It's like, what's the point in dealing with these people? Just fuck them off. Any sensible party in this country right now is not going to throw their lot in with trans people. Let's put it that way. And to be fair, they're not going to do that in America either because we're just not popular.
I'm going to be absolutely honest with you. When my frustrations with the left is that I see the crazies on the left.
Yeah.
And I see the moderates, the people who I...
Wait, she's actually wearing, like, a hair clip. Why would he have it, like, that far down? It's like, at that point, what's it doing? I don't know. It just looks wrong to me. Anyway, I'll stop picking on her appearance. Like, she looks otherwise fine.
Would listen to the people I think, actually, you've got a real point here, particularly when it comes to economics. And then I'd see them not do anything with the nutters over there. And I'm like, well, here's the thing, mate. If you're not going...
You have to call out bad behavior in your community. It's the only way. If you see things that are bad, even if it's someone like me and you think that I'm a transphobe or a TERF or a traitor to my own kind or whatever shit because I actually will hold trans people to task, then you need to do that. And there needs to be more discussions and more back and forths, because there should be room for a lot more different kinds of people than there are.
Going to deal with the nutters over here. How are you going to deal with Apple?
That's
true.
And we did this to MAGA, right? You had the Nazis marching in Charlottesville. My side said every single Republican is exactly the same as the Nazis marching on Charlottesville. That's exactly how we treated them. Why does the right have to keep their crazies in line and we don't have to do that? You're completely right.
True. It's just a game of what are the people I don't like doing, that's what's bad. All the completely analogous shit on our side, we're just going to ignore. Let's ignore the way that leftist people use very much the language of bigotry when they're talking about people that are supposed like deserving targets, like white people and men and straight people, cis people, police, whatever else. It's the same thing to me. It's hatred. We all have hatred within us. It's an evolutionary thing. We used to kill each other in tribes when we'd see each other on site because we didn't like each other, like people that are other to us. So it's very much still ingrained in all of us. And the sooner we realize that it's being hateful that's the problem and start setting a fucking example, maybe that'll do something. We have to get rid of all the stupid shit, all the fucking hating on white people constantly. ACAB is pointless. No one actually wants police abolition. It's an extremely fringe place. And it's something that's very popular with trans people. And I kind of get it, but, you know, tarring everyone with the same brush is never really helpful in that situation. Like, advocating, therefore, for crazy policies about, like, abolishing the police, like, you're just not going to get anyone on your side. So, like, what's the point in any of it? I really don't understand. I think we should do away with all that shit. Intersectionality, it's an okay concept. We use it for everything. We stretch it beyond breaking point logically. Just fucking get rid of it then. Maybe it's not as useful as we think it is when we call just everyone privileged, irrespective of what their actual situation is and what kind of person they actually are and what they've actually been through, because we don't actually know each other. We just throw shit at each other.
This is a double standard. I need help pulling this around, and I can't do this by myself.
But I guess my point is, why is there not more backbone within the left to be able to come and stand out? Is it because they're scared of them? Is it because these people actually have a
There is gradually more backbone, I would say. You know, you've had people like Destiny who've been quite critical of trans people to the point where he's just a transphobe now. The gender critical thing is picking up a lot more steam. It's not just crazy people anymore. They're actually making points because we're so like unrepentantly pro things like trans sports, which we can't really defend. Because the whole point of women's sports is that people who are born men aren't meant to be able to be in there because of the potential advantages. Things like kids, where we're freaking parents out because we want teachers and like students to be able to have these conversations about gender identity and then not tell the parents any of it. Like, keep it completely away from the parents because you're worried they might, be bigots or something? Like, why not talk to them? Why don't we ever communicate?
Disproportionate sense of power? Is there something else going on? And this is a genuine question on my behalf because I don't understand why.
Do you want the real answer or do you
Yes.
want the political answer?
I want the real answer.
I used to think you were completely full of shit. When you talked about cancel culture, I was like, just get over it. You've got every privilege in the world. And now they've run this playbook on me.
Cancel culture is cancer culture. Just don't engage in it. Don't defend it. Don't be one of those dickheads being like, well, it doesn't exist because this person still has a platform elsewhere. Or it doesn't exist because this person was able to carry on their career. Do you know why that is? It's because those people are powerful enough and have enough of a following that they can take that cancellation attempt. Like, they'll lose out on some shit, sure, but they'll still have like a fan base and shit. The kind of people that cancel culture works on are smaller people who don't really have as much means to defend themselves. And that's what makes it like super insidious when you see like trans people and like pretty far left people using that kind of shit. Because the people they're ruining, they're not people like Brianna Wu. They're people like, I don't know, someone like me. I've never been fucking cancelled, but someone like me, if you cancelled me hard enough, I probably wouldn't come back. because I don't have that loyal fan base because I've been doing this for like a few weeks, you know?
Understand what happens when they go after your livelihood and your friends, and they make a price to just speak your mind and stand up to them. These are cultural bullies, and the truth is there's every incentive to keep your mouth shut and just let the movement get crazier and crazier. So this is hard choice time. This is gut check time. We either stand up to these crazies, we get back to basics. That means liberalism in the sense, if you want to make an offensive joke, God bless. That's what the First Amendment is about. We've got to be
Based, yes.
willing to talk to people we disagree with. We can't just, every time someone has a different opinion than us, load it up with moralistic language.
Or mute them. Sorry, I won't do that. Too easy. That's fine. She's doing way better in this because I agree with her. It's pretty simple.
So we win the argument and they're a terrible person and call it a day and never have a discussion about anything. There's no incentive to do this. Look at what's happened to my reputation since October 7th. It's been brutal. I think it's almost a character flaw.
But there comes a point, Brianna,
Yeah.
where you either let this kind of nonsense continue and you see the decimation of everything that you believe in, or you stand up. There's got to be a time, because you can't keep being supine about these issues and expecting them to go away.
I completely agree. Look at what we're doing with the trans children debate. This is such a good example, okay? Y'all may not agree with me. I think there are some children that need access to healthcare to transition. I don't think the system is working well.
I agree, but there's two problems. It's incredibly hard to gauge consent with children. And it's incredibly difficult, even in adults, to tell who actually has gender dysphoria and who doesn't, because all you can do is report it. So anyone can lie to their GP in order to get referred to the GIC, the Gender Identity Clinic. All you have to do is just lie a bunch. You can learn what kind of things you should say. Not even learn, you can pretty much work it out, what kind of things you should say to get that kind of healthcare. So who knows who the real cases are in adults. In kids, that's even harder. So for me, in principle, I could see certain ones, it being okay to put through transition, but I think it's too difficult. So at the moment, I very much lean towards maybe we just shouldn't. And that's before we get into puberty blockers not actually being reversible, it turns out. That's before we get into the kind of effects they can have, how they can affect growth down there, which can then affect your surgery, because if you're a female to male, you need something down there to turn into a vagina, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know, I probably am less sympathetic to the trans kids thing than Brianna. I pretty much am a hardline against at the moment.
Well now, but I think some need to get through. We need to look at this system and patch the holes. What is the progressive left's answer to any parent that
Trans all of them, and then if you have a problem with it, shut the fuck up. She's going to say that.
has a question on any of that? It is shut the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
It is don't ask those questions. These questions hurt our feelings.
I mean, I'm cheating. This was in the stinger thing at the start, but it's fine. It's fine. It's true. It is true. I'm agreeing with her pretty much consistently so far. When she talks about this kind of thing, I agree with her. I think there's a lot of other stuff. If she was talking about it, I probably wouldn't. I don't know. I guess see the Queeman debate video I did, or just watch that debate. You don't have to watch me reacting to it. It's not that interesting.
So we're talking about public healthcare policy. We've got to move back to science and back to reality. And I guess, from your point of view, what is wrong with progressives that we're not doing this? Why do you think I'm one of 5?
Well, I think you put your finger on it when you talk about the consequences for you. By the way, this happens on the right increasingly too.
Sure.
I wrote an article about my critique of, I praised him for some things, but also critiqued his comments about Russia and Ukraine. Tucker Carlson, I wrote an article called Tucker Carlson and the Woke Right.
It drives me insane when someone starts a sentence and then it takes ages before they mention the person they're talking about. I was ready to.
And someone disinvited me from a party that and you're just going, you're just the mirror image. You don't believe in diversity of opinion.
Right.
You just want your opinion regurgitated. So
The problem is, it's not horseshoe theory. Horseshoe theory isn't real. The problem is, people just have a lot of common behaviors, I guess. I don't know. I need to work on that more, but like, horseshoe theory is like approaching the point, but taking it in the wrong direction, I guess. It's much more just human nature, the way that a lot of these people will just operate on like tribalistic, like partisan lines, and will treat almost any minor thing as like an infringement of that, where you're not part of us anymore. It happens on both sides, and it's because of human nature. It's not to do with the left being a certain way or the right being a certain way. We're not different fucking species, and we're not that different in general. And many of the people that hate other people that don't hold the same opinions as they do just don't talk to anyone with those kind of opinions. So it's way easier to dehumanize those people.
Tribes generally enforce the whatever rules of the tribe through any means necessary.
Oh, look, I said tribes, and he immediately said tribes.
In order to do that. So I understand that. The question I wanted to ask you, I guess, is you mentioned that 6 years ago or 10 years ago, it's one or two questions I want to ask you. People like you would have been criticizing people like us at the time or whatever.
That's right.
And would have said cancel culture doesn't exist until you personally experience it. And I've heard that from a lot of people who have the switch.
I didn't believe in it until the ContraPoints video, which it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't take someone you're amenable to pointing something out for you to believe it. Like, there should be a way of like reaching across the aisle and thinking, hey, this is someone I'm not too fond of, but they're saying something about something that I have the opposite belief in. Like, at least see what they have to say.
That you're going through. What was it back then that drove you to behave in that way?
I thought that people like you had all the power, and I thought that we had no power, and I thought that it was the way to get to a better world. You know?
Do you think both sides, should I say, do you think both sides feel that way? That the other side is the one with all the power? Because you've got the privilege kind of stuff coming from the left. You know, a lot of conservatives are like white, whatever, you know, using that kind of thing. The conservatives will say that the left has a stranglehold on the media, like education, stuff like that. So it's kind of both sides do that, which is interesting. I've not thought about that really before.
You know what? We've tried my version of the progressive playbook for 10 years, telling comedians, telling jokes we don't like to shut up. That doesn't work.
No.
The left has had, like, look at what's happened to feminism. Do you know how guilty I feel about this? We've lost Roe in the United States and access to abortion. Feminism should be a very strong public force right now, and it's not. It's never been weaker.
Well, in some ways it is, because you've got the gender critical stuff coming up, which is making a lot of waves, and we have no answers to it, because for years and years we've just been cutting away all those people. Oh, they're just bigots. Let's just shit on them ad nauseum and not really engage with anything they said. So we've got no arguments, and feminism is kind of turned against us, if anything. Like, I don't really call myself a feminist anymore. I used to. But to me, gender critical still is like feminist. It still has feminist roots. Like, there's a through line between, there's a through line between feminism and the arguments as they're now being used. And we don't seem to have any arguments on the trans side. We don't seem to want to engage with gender criticals and understand what they think. The thing is, like, anyone should be able to give a decent approximation of like their opponent's arguments, as long as they're making any arguments, you know? And most people can't. I bet most like transphobic people couldn't make a case for why transgenderism is a thing or whatever, even if they don't personally believe in it. That's just an example. So many people on the left could definitely not, and like especially trans people, if we're talking about gender critical, could definitely not like steelman like the gender critical position. Like, I could easily, because I know it, even if I don't fully agree with it. I agree with like some of it, but people don't feel the need to do that. Like, they've got someone else telling, oh, this is just bigotry, this is designed to keep you down, these are people you can blame for your life being shit, even though maybe transitioning didn't actually solve anything for you and you're just pretending it did and you're still fucked up. And it could be lots of things, but yeah, it's something I think about.
why is feminism so unappealing to so many people? It's because rather than talking about real policy that will affect people's lives, like daycare for children, or working wages, or reproductive health care, or access to a gynecologist, we've defined it to these boutique, like luxury nonsense culture war stuff. So normal women are out there going, this is just not relevant to me. So it's just
That's very true. Like, fucking hell, the whole Hogwarts Legacy boycott, all the fucking arguments about xenogenders, like neo-pronouns on, like, Twitter. Like, how are we so oppressed? And yet at the same time, that's the shit we're talking about constantly. It doesn't make any sense. Like, shouldn't we be talking about, like, the fucking wait times? Which, in the UK, like, it depends on where you're going. For the London GIC, when I looked it up before, it was, like, 5 years between being referred from your GP and going to the clinic for the first appointment. That's a really fucking long time. And people aren't talking about that. They're talking about whether neo-pronouns and xenogenders are valid, and why if you buy Harry Potter fucking Hogwarts Legacy, you're a bigot. It doesn't make any sense to me.
And the other thing feminism did as well is feminism is such a broad church. It's a hard word to use accurately, but once you start trying to convince at least some women that they're supposed to hate men, you're going to lose the audience very quickly, because women generally don't hate men.
That's right.
They want to build a life with a man and have kids and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, the misandry stuff, just cut it out. There's no need for it. It's stupid. It's pointless. You're going to impress your equally stupid friends, and that's about it. Everyone else is going to think you're crazy.
I'm fond of my husband, so I agree.
Yeah, as am I, even though I'm not a woman. Second question I wanted to ask you, and this sounds like a therapy session for me and Francis, and we've earned it.
Sure.
Yeah,
after 6 years.
After what you've done.
I'm sorry.
After 6 years of... No, but I will tell you the moment I realized that the left stopped caring about reality.
That's right.
It was 2016. No, it was 2017. And I saw Steve Bannon go from talk show to talk show to talk show to talk show. And all he did was explain how they won the election.
Okay.
And nobody listened. Nobody listened to what he was saying. Because the agenda was the only way these people could win is because they're racist and because they're evil and whatever. And nobody listened to what he was saying. And what he was saying is, this country is in deep trouble. This country is a place where people feel so alienated from the economic opportunities that used to be available to them and their families. They feel so alienated from, the general narrative about their country has now become negative, which is why the phrase "Make America Great Again" works, even if you don't like it. And I was listening to what he was saying, not from a perspective of like, oh, I'm so enthusiastic about this guy and his political leader being elected, but from the point of view of like, maybe there's something he's saying, having just won an election that nobody expected him to win, that people on the left need to take into account, so that by the time the next election comes around, you've learned the lessons, you're addressing people's concerns, and now you can come in with your message of, how do we make America work for the working person? Like, that's to me the left-wing message. How to get America working for the working person.
That's right.
We'll get you back to the interview in a minute, but first... That, my friends, is the sound of another sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. I know that building a business...
You know what, because I'm a massive transphobe, I'm going to let this whole thing play.
...takes work. Look at my face, I'm exhausted. But the lovely thing about Shopify is that no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify is with you every step of the way. Shopify is a commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Whether you're selling handmade jewelry, art prints, or podcast merch like us, buy our merch, Shopify simplifies selling online and in person so you can successfully grow your business. Shopify even gets you selling across social media marketplaces like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. TikTok just makes me angry, I'm too old. So, if you're ready to get serious about selling, sign up for a £1 per month trial period at shopify.co.uk/trigger. Go to shopify.co.uk/trigger. And one more time for luck. That's Shopify, themarychu.co.uk/trigger. And now, back to the interview.
We learned all the wrong lessons from the Trump years, right? The correct lesson that the left should have learned from Donald Trump was normal Americans that don't follow politics as closely as people like I do, have 5 newspaper subscriptions, look at the polls every day, talk to donors, all that kind of stuff. Normal people don't think the system is working for them and they want to break it, if you really want to get down to it. And instead, we believed this really comforting lie that half the country was lost and not worth talking to, and they were all racists, and they were...
As soon as we get into, not worth talking to territory, that's when alarm bells should be ringing. Just ever at this point. If you're writing people off as not worth talking to, especially large swathes of the country, then you're losing already. Because other people are going to talk to these people. It's the same with the men shit. The left doesn't really want to appeal to men unless they're willing to cut themselves out. So it's well, then they're going to go right, aren't they? So it's we fuck ourselves, if anything.
We're disposable, and we stopped even imagining a way to live with one another. There's no future for the Democratic Party where we don't get goddamn serious about listening to the people that don't have faith in the system and earning their trust. And so much of that starts with the conversation, and we are failing. This is why Biden is losing. It's not that Biden himself does not stand for this stuff. I actually think he's been a really good president. But the culture of the Democratic Party is so elitist and arrogant and unwilling to listen to ideas that we don't agree with, and treating half the country like they are assholes. This is not a formula for a democracy to survive.
Do you know, I was reading this. I think it might have been you that said it, or it came up in conversation, that the number one predictor for a marriage failing is not infidelity, it's not arguments, it's none of those things. It's contempt.
That's right.
And when I see, and it's not just progressives here, but also progressives in the UK, the contempt that they have for working class people, and let's be blunt about it, particularly in the UK, and I'm sure over here, white working class people, the way they talk about them, the way they address them, they're ready.
Yeah, it's interesting that, the far left kind of both tries to reach out to working class people, but also demonizes them a whole hell of a lot. And, fuck. I mean, we just don't have much shit to say to them a lot of the time. That, what was it called? Rich Men North of Richmond or something. Which spoke to a lot of people. I'm not going to hate on it. It's not my favorite song. It's not really my genre. I don't like acoustic a huge amount. But fucking Billy Bragg, doing a fucking parody or whatever, telling him to unionize and shit. It's people don't care about unions. I'm sorry about it. I don't know. But we just seem to, anyone who's working class and right wing, a lot of whom, went Tory for us, which, it is what it is. A lot of people were saying that, this was a mistake, and it was. I stand by that. But we treat them like they don't know what's good for them. It's a bit like if a trans person agrees with gender critical somewhat. It's we invoke this turkeys voting for Christmas thing, as if the other person has no idea what they're doing and just hasn't thought, oh no, these people are bad or something, when they probably don't think anywhere near like what you do in general.
Rednecks, they're stupid, they're racist, and then they go, oh, why didn't you vote for us?
They're some dumb animal to manipulate. It's insulting. So let me...
Oh, like when Bernie bros were oh, why didn't more people of color come out for Bernie? Don't they know what's good for them?
Tell you what changed my mind on this. The big reason, the thing that changed my paradigm on this was running for office, because it gets you off of fucking Twitter and out there in the real world where you've got to go knock on.
Yeah, you have to actually collaborate with people you don't 100% agree with. It's wild.
Doors and just talk to normal people as oh shit, the stuff we're talking about on Twitter is not what they believe. So yeah. I think there is a lot of theory crafting in progressive spaces where they've got a lot of academic ideas about how elections and how power works. And I think it's fundamentally divorced from reality. Now, to be
True. It's the same with the gender shit. Like, I can just call myself whatever I want, and I am that now. Like, and that completely circumvents, like, sex and stuff, which we're pretending doesn't exist. And, like, if you're a trans person, then your sex is just your condition that you have that's bad or something. I don't know. It's bizarre.
fair, the Democratic Party has been really poor at bringing younger people in and showing them how our system works, how NGP works, how canvassing works, how data works, how, get out the vote works, like bread and butter election stuff. And that is very much a generational institutional failure. But at the same time, like, these people are not showing up. There's every single opportunity to do that. So go out there in the real world, actually talk to the voters you want to represent, and I think we can move forward.
Because I think what a lot of people are frustrated about with the left and progressives in general is focusing on culture.
That's right.
And actually not talking about the things like you touched on before that actually really matter, which is economics.
That's right.
The fact that people...
Yeah, we kind of just tend to be like, well, capitalism's bad. Like, overthrow capitalism. It's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. We talk about late-stage capitalism. We don't even know if it's going to be late-stage capitalism until it ends. So it's a conspiracy theory, right?
The gap between rich and poor is widening. It seems that, corporations are becoming, particularly big multinational corporations, are becoming more and more powerful. Governments are more in hock to these corporations. This is what the left should be doing. They should be challenging this.
100%. I think we don't understand how easy we could have it on the left. If we stopped this nonsense and we were a party that unapologetically stood for all those things, for working class people, I think we would take the country for 2 generations. And we just can't. So,
do you think part of the reason for that, Brianna, is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this is just stuff people say, I don't know if it's true, I'm just curious to explore it with you.
I think I've worked it out. I think the clip is meant to be so it goes down that side. I know it still looks weird to me. Anyway.
The elite of the Democratic Party, it's probably true of the Republican Party to a large extent, but you'd expect that more, is in hock to the big corporations, the big tech. They're all working, colluding together. So I guess what incentives do they have to take the correct position on all of this?
I think this is the problem with power. I can tell you, when I ran for Congress, I spent 8 hours a day in a chair fundraising, like basically calling for money for my campaign. And, you are very beholden to the donors that bring you money. This is why a policy I believe in is public financing of elections.
We have that in the UK.
Does it work for y'all?
Better than here, for sure, yeah.
It's like something's got to change. You're right, the incentive structure is just not there. And there's a lot of incentives for Democrats to say the right things, but when the votes come up on the House floor, to not do the right things. So in my estimation, y'all may not agree with it. I still think we're better than the Republicans, but I think until that changes, people are not going to change their assessment of us.
And Brianna, you said that you think Joe Biden has been a good president.
Yeah.
And I know there's going to be a lot of people in the comments who are going to be, shall we say, politely disagreeing.
Sure.
Okay, why is it that you think...
I might skip some of this just because a lot of it's about, like, Joe Biden. Why is he good? Why is he not? I'll watch a bit of it, but ultimately, I don't live there. It's going to be difficult for me to comment a huge amount, I guess.
I'm going to ask you a question,
Please.
which is it's not particularly pleasant, but it needs to be said.
Go for it.
I very much admire you for coming on the show, Brianna.
Sure.
And I very much admire you for taking tough questions, fielding them, and dealing with them in the spirit that they're meant. I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of other people on maybe that side of the argument, or the Democrats, strike me as weak, if I'm being blunt. If your biggest fear is being called a racist,
Sure,
or being said that you're whatever else, then you shouldn't be anywhere near power. I'm sorry. You're a leader. You're
Yeah, that's fair.
there to make tough decisions, and people are going to say nasty things about you. Tough. You want the position, you've got to deal with that.
this is why I've been in progressive politics for the last decade. I wanted a Democratic Party with some balls that would stand up on all these things. The problem is
It's very easy to make jokes about a trans person saying that, but let's not.
progressive power base has lost their goddamn minds. So where the fuck are you going to go? You've got the insurgent side of it that's trying to push the Democratic Party to actually get serious about public policy. I believe it, like universal health care. The American healthcare system is completely broken. I had a theory of change that if we were out there and we pushed the traditional corporate Democrats hard from the progressive side, that would get us to better public policy. The problem is the progressive left is so crazy nowadays, they're worse than the corporate Democrats. So we've got to turn this whole ship around.
And is that possible, though?
I don't know. I don't think it's likely.
Yeah, like, we'd have to find some kind of middle ground between the progressives and, like, whatever the Democrat establishment is like. It doesn't seem like finding middle ground is something that people are good at. It doesn't seem like it's something we're trending towards. I mean, we're seeing someone like Brianna talking to these people. That's at least something, but there's got to be so much more than that. And I don't know. It's not likely to happen anytime soon.
To be really honest with you.
So what does the future look like? In our interview with the brilliant Tim Urban, he said,
I love the cliffhanger. She sighs. Oh, this is going to be good. Anyway.
We should be talking about longevity and longevity science.
Researchers like the biologist David Sinclair have recently made game-changing discoveries showing that it's possible to slow down aging or even reverse it with interventions that go beyond healthy habits. And this is why I'm using Verso. Verso is a company dedicated to translating scientific breakthroughs into products that hold the potential to increase longevity. As we age, we accumulate zombie cells, all damaged cells that linger beyond their useful life. These zombie cells infect other healthy cells, speeding up the aging process. That's where we see wrinkles, arthritis, hair loss, cognitive deterioration, and so on. What scientists have realized is that when we induce autophagy, the body's natural cleanup process, we can starve these zombie cells of energy and kill them. This is where Clean Being comes in with its thoughtfully formulated blend of clinically proven ingredients intended to activate autophagy for improved cellular health. After taking Clean Being for some time, clinical trials have proven better skin, less inflammation, healthier hair, hormonal regulation, better immunity, enhanced vision, and enhanced cognitive function, amongst many other incredible results. If you want to read more about all of the research, then check out the reference link in the description of this video. Plus, Verso publishes third-party testing on every batch of its products to guarantee that you're getting exactly what you're paying for. So, if you want to join me, you can get 15% off your first order by going to ver.so. That's ver.so, and use code TRIGGER to save 15% off your first order.
My hope in speaking up is I see a lot of people that are in my DMs and they say, Brianna, I agree with you. And my hope is if enough people like me stand up and we'll start getting real about this stuff, we can start pushing the crazies out and get the Democratic Party on a path that makes sense. I don't think that's likely. I think there's a flip a coin. We're going to see who wins this election. Is it going to be Joe Biden or Donald Trump? And from there, we are going to be in the wilderness without power if we lose, and we're going to have to find a new version of the Democratic Party. I don't know if that's going to be a better version of the Democratic Party. So,
well,
yeah.
let me say something to you,
Please.
but through you to some of the people that follow you that might be interested. I really believe, I was in Australia recently, and I was invited to a dinner where there were a lot of people who were influential in Australia. And there were people from both sides of politics there. And the person who invited us, he said, look, I don't want the other party to be elected.
That's right.
But at some point they will be.
Yeah.
And I want them to be the very best possible party for Australia.
That's right.
Best possible government for Australia. And in that spirit, my view is the only way that the left is actually going to start to have a good impact on society is when Donald Trump gets elected again, which I suspect he will be. You don't agree? And I may well be wrong.
I think it's going to be close. I think I see data, and I think I have a perspective on the state efforts that probably informs my opinion.
And you're probably much better informed about it than I am. I'm just operating on a general sentiment kind of basis. But I guess what I'm saying is the mistake that was made in 2016, which you articulated so well, was a failure to take seriously the concerns of the ordinary American.
That's right.
if Donald Trump is elected again, my greatest fear is that instead of doing that, instead of learning the lesson and going, okay, what are we not listening to? Is it immigration? Okay, we got to change our position on immigration. Is it foreign policy? Okay, we got to.
Is he going to say it'll just radicalize him even further and we'll get even crazier than what we already have been? Let's see.
We got to adjust. My worry, and I know this is Francis' worry too, because we talk about it all this time, is if Donald Trump is reelected, you're going to see a progressive meltdown on a scale that's going to dwarf 2016.
That's right.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe dwarf fucking 2020. Who knows what we're going to see? I doubt we'll see anything like storming the Capitol because, I mean, look at most of the people we're talking about. You know, it's probably not going to happen, but hey, who knows? Who knows? It's going to be rough. It's going to be rough if fucking Joe Biden wins because half the fucking progressives don't like him either. They'll not vote for him, which is a tacit endorsement of Donald Trump if he wins, and then complain about Donald Trump being in power.
Which will only make the country worse and the left way more unelectable.
Because they don't believe in democracy, fundamentally. Look at the fringe Free Palestine people. There's some people in that movement that genuinely see scenes of horror out of Gaza and they want to do something about it. And I respect that.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there are a lot of people in that movement that want democracy and America dead.
Well, they hate America.
Yeah.
They do. They hate our own country.
They do.
Yeah.
When did it become like inappropriate to be on the left and say you love your country and you respect your police officers and your teachers? You respect
1960.
someone. Well, it's not how I feel.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've got to confront this illiberalism that is just strangling the Democratic Party. We've got to get more comfortable with free speech and talking to people that disagree with us. We need to get much more serious.
Anna, with you as well, as you mentioned when we were talking.
There's a part I want to get to. Quite a lot of it. Where it gets more into like the Democratic Party stuff specifically, I do start to, it loses me a bit. Like, I know some stuff, but I don't live there ultimately.
About you potentially coming on the show, that there's probably a lot of areas that we disagree about.
Sure.
Not you disagree with Republicans about, we're obviously not Republicans. So what do you think that is? I'm keen to find that out.
Well, I want to be polite. I think
You don't need to.
You
be.
don't need to be polite.
I think
We're in
generally
America now.
speaking, I think generally speaking, when I watch your stuff, I think you hold the right and the left to two different standards. And I think you're a little too tough on the left. But I understand it because I spend more time.
But people are going to
criticizing
say
them.
that about you now. This is
The thing with someone like Brianna or someone like myself doing it, because I consider myself on the left, I guess. Just about, I'm like quite centrist leaning these days. The thing is, like, it feels a lot more necessary from your own side. And it's also more difficult to criticize your own side because you're not going to make friends doing it. You'll make friends criticizing the right. I could sit here and soy out every single fucking day about what fucking Matt Walsh has tweeted this time that's transphobic, apparently. And I'll make loads of friends doing that because I'm going against someone who's not on my side. When you go against your own side, you have to be prepared for the fact that you're not really appealing that much to anyone. Like, I have to acknowledge that not most right-wingers, I don't want to say that. There's a fair amount of right-wingers who won't give me a fair shake whatever happens, or Brianna, because they just don't like trans people. And at the same time, the kind of people who at least claim to like trans people, I think a lot of them are actually transphobic because they don't think you can have your own mind. They think if you're trans, you have to be left. You have to be a socialist or whatever fucking shit. Like, I'm risking alienating the people on my own side for pretty meager gains on the right, you know? So it's just so much harder. It's so much less rewarding to do that. But at the same time, it's a lot more necessary.
They
the
do.
thing.
That's fine.
People will the progressives will call you right wing or whatever.
And they do.
And they do, because you're criticizing the left. You're doing that out of a place of, let's get our shit together, right? I want our society to get its shit together because the one unique experience that I have that most people don't have is I've lived outside of this
That's
society.
right.
I was born outside of this society. And I can tell you, people in Russia and people in China are not having debates on TV about fucking pronouns.
That's right.
Right? And the more time we spend on that,
Oh, I hit that. That's such a big point. Fuck. like, how privileged is it that we even have these conversations? How privileged is it that we get to obsess over the fact that someone didn't call us they, them? How oppressed actually are we? We talk about fucking Turf Island, talk about like how terrible it is being trans in America because people are religious. We're some of the most fucking privileged people in the world, and there's a reason why most trans people seem to be white and Western. Like, I think so many of like the privilege points that far leftists make and like trans people make are complete bullshit. Like, we can call anyone privileged if we try hard enough, but we're all pretty fucking privileged because we've got the time on our hands to be having these conversations. We're not sat there like wondering where our next meals are coming from half the time. Because, I mean, for trans people, it's like a fucking GoFundMe away, let's be real. Most of us just fucking GoFundMe for everything. I don't personally. Like, the shit that I have I worked for, I'm in a different position at the moment because of things, but I don't know. It's crazy. Like, we talk about trans people from other countries that are actually at much greater risk of being hurt than we are. And we still act like we're the biggest fucking victims on the planet. Because someone didn't call us a they, someone didn't call me a she. It's not the fucking end of the world. I think there's a huge amount of privilege on the trans side that we don't acknowledge.
The less time we spend realizing that we live in a geopolitical battle of civilizations, and
you know what's really fucked, actually? A lot of the trans people I know, plenty of my friends even, come from way less wealthy backgrounds than I do. I don't come from a wealthy background, I come from a middle class background. But it should be me that's being the privileged one. It should be me that doesn't have my eyes open to this shit. So why am I having to tell so many other people who should know this shit, you know? Like, one of my closest friends, like, his circumstances, like, growing up, he ended up, like, extremely poor, getting into terrible credit for shit that wasn't really his fault. But, like, you know, plenty of trans people come from those kind of backgrounds too. And yet, don't understand that privilege completely just doesn't fucking work how they think it does because they're so incredibly biased from living in this country. It's mad. I don't know. I don't think I quite made sense. I know what I'm trying to fucking say. It's frustrating. I'm getting quite tired, to be fair. I've been going for 3.5 hours. My social battery, guys. I'm Hassan Piker.
We are sliding backwards.
That's right. So look, if I have a 5% disagree with you about pronouns, like, let's be really clear here. You are on the side of democracy and liberalism, and I think something I appreciate about you is really talking about the threat of terrorism in very, very clear terms. I think that sometimes in this country, when we think about Islam, it's the westernized, like, liberal professor version of it. And I think you're not really thinking about it through, like, what is happening in Syria or what ISIS is doing or, Iran and the Cold War with Saudi Arabia. So I think what I appreciate about you is I think you talk about this in really clear moral terms. And I wish we could have a better conversation about that in this country. I think speaking like about learning the wrong lessons, I think America learned a lot of the wrong lessons from 9/11 and George Bush, because we were attacked. That was something we needed to take seriously. But the lesson we took from that is because his leadership and decisions were so poor and got us into 2 wars that did not address terrorism. It created terrorism. We have 2 generations of Americans now that don't think the United States military can accomplish anything. That is false. We need to be an arsenal of democracy for the world.
Making a good point.
And I think I want to play my role in getting us there.
Well, that's great. But come back with me to what you think we might disagree about, because one of the things you mentioned was the trans issue.
Sure.
And obviously we all think this about our own position, but my view is Francis and I have taken a pretty sensible position on it. To have a broad range of perspectives on. We had a trans woman on the show very early, the first person with whom we raised this issue, who absolutely hates our guts now and whatever.
Who is it?
India.
Oh, India Willoughby. She was, she was on something that I watched. I don't know if I Yeah, I did post it. Fuck, it was Benjamin Butterworth, some fucking posh boy, like trying to be a TRA. It was embarrassing. And India Willoughby was like pretty against what he was saying, but like nowadays she's like the most soy fuck on Twitter like possible, like getting into these stupid like spats with like J.K. Rowling, like, and I don't know if she acts like the victim and like complains about harassment. She 100% brings it on herself and gets people to join in on bringing it on herself. It's really quite sad, honestly.
Willoughby.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I need to watch that at some point because she's gone off the fucking rails. She is mad. Like, following her on Twitter is like, it's an experience. Jesus Christ.
Okay.
And we had...
Like, she makes Brianna look sane on Twitter, and like, Brianna goes pretty hard on Twitter.
She's a friend. I like her a lot.
And we had other people who had different perspectives, everyone from Buck Angel, who I know you know, to people who are very critical of...
I quite like Buck Angel. He gets a lot of shit. I think he's made a lot of good points, and he's quite an important kind of person to have around, similar to Blair White.
certain things, and I thought that their criticisms in some ways was excessive, but in other ways really important.
Sure.
And the place I think we've both landed in is the place kind of to some extent we started in, which is adults should be able to do what they want.
Great.
Children, however, are not capable of making informed decisions about.
I agree. I'm not pro-trans in kids. I think there's probably some that have needs, but we're not at a point where we can gauge consent effectively and accurately, and we're not at a point where we can diagnose gender dysphoria accurately.
About the future because they're children.
Sure.
And should therefore be protected from medicalization.
Sure.
And there's quite a lot of evidence that a lot of children who go down the transgender path are actually not transgender at all. They're either gay or they're autistic or both, or bullied or whatever. And I don't think cutting bits off
Or their friends started transitioning.
those children is the right position.
To be clear, you can't get surgery until you're 18.
That is not true. Fucking hell. Jesus Christ. Everyone pushes this thing. Like, people will talk about surgeries on minors and will say like, oh, well, you know, I haven't seen any evidence of that. Like, no, you don't get surgery unless you're 18. There's places in like Massachusetts and stuff like that. They offer mastectomies to 15 to 18-year-olds, I think. I also read a study that covered the long-term effects of like mastectomies on patients between, I think it was 12 and 17. It's not no people, and it's been going on longer than you'd think. I think the study started in like 2012 or something, like longer ago than I expected. Like, unless that study made up all of its data and is complete bunk, which would be weird considering the conclusions were fairly trans-positive, we do surgery on minors. It's unavoidable. There's no getting around it. We need to start biting that bullet.
I understand it. Cut
You can
bits
get
out.
puberty blockers.
Yeah, I'm puberty blockers.
Right? That's pretty.
Oh, he's gonna let her get away with this. Listen, I've been agreeing with Brianna the whole time. This is bunk. This is not true. This is absolutely not true. You can get surgery done as a minor.
But that's not cutting
that.
the bits
Correct.
off.
Fine. Fine.
Oh, he doesn't know. Ah, come on. We need more pushback against this. We need, every time someone says this lie, we need this to be pushed back against. It's true. You've been able to get surgery as a minor, as a trans male teen, if that's what you are, for a decent while now.
Fine. Let's take that. Medicalizing
Sure.
confused children is something I'm against.
So, look, this is
Oh, he doesn't know. He could have gone so much harder than this. Shit. What are we saying? Trans debate. Yeah, let's see what she comes back with, because she's incorrect. I don't know. I don't know if she knows that she's incorrect or if she genuinely just hasn't looked at this part. But she's incorrect.
going to get me canceled by trans Twitter. But something that's changed in the last 10 years is we've really redefined who is trans, right?
Yeah.
It used to be people that medically transitioned. You went through the Benjamins and then...
Basically, you have gender dysphoria. Trans is the treatment for gender dysphoria. Whereas now, people just identify as it. They're not so focused on passing, which causes problems in like bathrooms, because if you're a trans woman, everyone always says things like, oh, I can clock someone. Like, that's usually like still photos, and people look different when they're actually in motion, when they're actually in front of you. If you look like a woman decently enough and make the effort, you're going to get left alone. If you're just about the identity and you don't care if you look like a woman or not because it's all about the identity, then it's going to cause problems with you, because you're going to go into bathrooms and people are going to automatically see you as someone that doesn't fit in there because you look like a man, because people make those decisions based on what they see. And that's the whole point of being trans, is to like play on those perceptions and get them to perceive you as a woman by whatever means you can, by raising the pitch of your voice, by wearing makeup, by wearing clothes, you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't mean dressed like a fucking toddler, but I guess that's what we're doing now. But I mean, fuck, I can't remember what I was saying. Fuck this. Yeah, basically, it's about identity now, and that's part of the problem, because gender identity is extremely vague. It's not well-defined at all. It's not based in science, it's based in philosophy, and trying to get people to, like, actually confirm where their beliefs fucking come from is a complete nightmare. But, you know, I don't know. It is what it is. Let's see what she says. So she said, basically, medicalized, and then what it is.
And they were the WPATH standards and some reasonable stuff. Go read it. Go to a therapist for 3 months, get on hormones, have real life experience out there, get surgery like a year later, right? Not a crazy like gauntlet to go down. We've expanded all of these things in really extreme ways now. There are people in the trans movement that, hand to God, really believe in self-ID. Like, you should just be able to say, I'm...
Yeah, I used to be pro self-ID. I think mostly because of how long it takes to get seen by anyone, because like people don't really get to access healthcare for a long time. Like, you start when you're 20, you might be 25, 26 before you see someone for the first time, and that's just the start of the process. So I think I was basically pro anything that would have made it faster, but these days I don't think you can just self-ID. I don't think that's something uniquely whether you should just be able to say, well, I'm a woman. Because if you're not a woman, how do you get to say that and then take on all the protected characteristics that come with being a woman? Like, there's a lot of reasons. Like, self-ID, I'm not for it anymore. I think the way it's like medicalized, I think that's extremely necessary. And like in the US, I think it particularly is, because you won't be able to get your shit like covered by insurance if it's not medicalized, if it's just something you self-ID as. And if you don't have gender dysphoria and you're transitioning, is it not just body modification at a certain point? Like, should you even be accessing those kind of services in that case? Because isn't it just cosmetic? Isn't it just body modification? Isn't it like getting a nose job or some shit? But yeah.
This gender, and that has legal consequences for what spaces you
Like
can
that.
enter. Yeah. This is crazy, right?
Fucking nuts. Completely crazy. This is the kind of shit I used to believe, like all the stuff that all the trans people were pushing. And it's when you scrutinize it more and when you think, I haven't actually really been listening a huge amount. I don't really actually understand a huge amount of what these people are saying now. And you listen to it properly and you scrutinize it and you hear it filtered through someone who doesn't agree, or you even hear them talking about people they don't agree with. Like, it becomes very illuminating if you're willing to have your perception challenged, and if you're willing to accept that maybe you were wrong about some shit, because you have to be. It's a huge step to take to take on stuff that you don't agree with and think, well, maybe there's a chance that I'm wrong about this. And it's very important that people get to a point where they can do that, like consistently even. Like, you should always be open to new shit. It should never be a case of, well, I believe this, so that's me for the rest of my life or whatever. Like, that's completely mad.
Don't understand this non-binary stuff. I have friends that are non-binary. I think they're going through something real.
Like, my partner's non-binary. I don't know how much I believe in it. I do believe in non-binary in the sense that I see how gender dysphoria like works in other people that don't have it as strongly or have just had different experiences. So I see it fitting in that sense, and maybe having a catch-all for people that aren't transitioning but aren't exactly like normal gender-wise. I don't think there's a problem with having a kind of catch-all term for people like that. But it's gone very esoteric where it's just based on identity. Like, I've known people who literally, they call themselves trans. Like, they'll fucking post every fucking trans day of visibility, which is more like cis day of visibility, if anything. They'll post those like clockwork. They look exactly just like their gender that they were when they were born. Like, born females that just look female. They haven't changed their name or anything. They don't do anything to, like, transition really in any way other than using, like, they, them pronouns. Basically, I look like a woman, but I'm gonna insist you call me everything but a woman. And that's the extent of their transition. And I'm supposed to be like, yeah, that person's a trans person just like me, when we've got nothing in common. And to me, that's actually kind of appropriative. You're, like, appropriating what isn't yours and saying, well, you don't have to have gender dysphoria to transition. So, like, what, you're trans by technicality? Because in the DSM it says someone who identifies as any other gender than what they are. Like, it's gone, like, even the DSM definition I kind of think is bullshit at this point. I think, yeah, you can be trans by technicality. I don't know why you'd want to be. I don't know why you'd do that and then try and have a huge stake in a movement that is supposed to be for other people than you, because you're just cis at the end of the day. Just be cis. It's okay. You're not boring because you're white and cis. And if you're trans friends, if you're far left friends, if you're gay friends, think less of you because you're just a fucking cis lesbian or, like, bisexual or whatever, then maybe they're the problem. And maybe actually you're kind of hanging around with the wrong fucking people.
They're in the W path, but they're going through something different than people who medically transition. So to come back to your point about children, if you are adding all of that onto who is considered trans, of course there are going to be some of those children that are non-binary or just don't like the gender role or are confused or gay, that transition is not going to serve them. So, I personally have the opinion that if you look...
I gotta say, I think it really loses me in particular how little anyone will acknowledge this kind of shit. Because when it's a kid, like, say you have a mastectomy when you're 15, and then at 20 you regret it, like, actually you want to have kids and stuff, how are you going to breastfeed them now? You've taken away, a part of your life, a part of womanhood, because you thought something when you were 15 or younger or something, I don't know why you don't really hear trans people taking that shit seriously, and you don't really hear any kind of remorse for those people that got into this for the wrong reasons and now have kind of fucked themselves a bit. And it seems fucking sociopathic when you think about it that way. A lot of things do in the trans movement, to me, quite frankly.
Look at the science here. It is not particularly conclusive one way or another. We need to double down on the studies we're doing. We need to really make a better pathway to serve those children. And I do want more of them filtered out.
So would you agree with me then that until we have the rock solid evidence, we shouldn't be transitioning kids?
I think I wouldn't agree with you there because I personally know so many people that are such good friends of mine that this saved their life. But what I think would help is progressives are not having an honest conversation with parents. And I am not sure gender clinics are either. They're
True. Stop being gung-ho with other people's kids. Just straight up. If you're trans and you are pro-trans and kids, at least recognize that you're talking about other people's kids and not your own. And acknowledge that and be empathetic. There's a fucking huge lack of empathy on, like, the trans far left side of things. And people will, like, talk about how empathetic they are constantly, but never show any of it.
saying things like, your child is going to suicide if you don't do this really.
Yes, it's fucking manipulative as shit. And, like, the thing in America especially is, like, you pay for it, on the NHS, it gets paid through taxes. So there's arguably less of an impetus for them to push someone through transition. Whereas, like, somewhere in America, like a clinic in America, you have to accept that there's a bit more of a monetary incentive because, it's at the point of sale or whatever.
Life-altering thing. I don't think that's a good message. I think we need to be talking to parents with more respect about all of this.
One of the things that I've
And what's the other thing? Like, is it called suicide contagion or something like that? Where, like, if someone knows someone who's killed themselves, it then makes it more likely that it'll happen, that they'll do it themselves one day. Which I can imagine, like, it kind of normalizes it for you in a way, right? There was, Newport, Wales, I can't remember when it was. Fuck, I don't know if I was a kid at this point, but like, there was a huge spate of like teen suicides, just like one after the other at one point. They'd be finding them like one, then another the next day and shit like that. I think all doing it in kind of similar ways as well. This was in Newport in Wales. It's interesting to think about, and again, it's stuff you don't hear about if we're talking about trans communities. It's stuff we don't hear about because it kind of is manipulation, you know, like that's their leverage. While you're killing people, you're sentencing people to commit suicide because their life will be worth nothing, and it's a terrible message. And it kind of normalizes those kind of feelings further. We're always talking about suicide around trans people. Is that not potentially gonna move the dial a bit towards suicide because of how much we're talking about it? It's something to think about. I don't have like those kind of things. It's difficult to measure, I guess, when there's other factors. And, you know, the weight is a big one, which is why I wish we talked about that kind of shit instead of xenogenders. But they talk about what they want, and I keep quiet. And then when I talk about what I want, I'm still not supposed to talk about what I want.
Actually have a deep level of empathy for a lot of trans people. And trans people have spoken to both of us about it, and me individually, and all the rest of it is, you know, it's tough. It's tough dealing with gender dysphoria. It's really hard. It's really hard. You go through the processes, you take the meds, you go through what else. And then most people just want to get on with their life.
That's right.
They just want to live.
True. Yes, that'd be nice. Shit like Pride Month, to me, is like othering. I hate Trans Day of Visibility because I don't think visibility is always a good thing. I think we've pushed visibility as if it's the most important thing in the fucking world, when it really goes both ways. It's gonna educate more people, sure. It's also gonna bring more awareness to the kinds of people that are not gonna be amenable to it. And you have to be able to deal with like the fallout of that.
Live their lives, they want to do their jobs, they want to have their friends, their families, and that's it. And they've been politicized now.
That's right.
And, you know, one person said to me, like, I just feel like I'm being asked to represent all the trans people. I am just a person.
That's right.
And I just want you to leave me alone.
That's right. That it was this way 10 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not quite. It was already starting to get weird by the time that I transitioned. And I think I got in right before the door started closing. Because, like, for me, it was about 10 months between being referred and seeing someone. I'm pretty sure there's people that started a year or two later than me that waited, like, years. It got really insane. And, like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why people want to other themselves the way they do. You know, wearing all the pronoun stuff, all the badges and stuff, like all your clothes are like trans pride messages and stuff. I don't know why you'd want to do that. I don't want to write a big fucking sign across my forehead that says trans. I want to wear the clothes that I want to wear, irrespective of if they're fucking pink, white, and blue. Because those aren't my fucking colours, okay? I don't wear those kind of colours because I'd look like a nonce. I don't want to look like a nonce because, you know, who does, right? So, yeah, we have a weird relationship with like visibility and what were they saying? I've completely forgotten. It's getting late. Okay, I've got ADHD. I've got ADHD. This one for all you Hunter Avalon fans.
I'm being asked to represent all the trans people. I am just a person.
Yeah, like I just wanna live my life. I genuinely do. And the thing is, like, if you're an ordinary, like, transsexual person who doesn't have crazy views on the world, who doesn't act like a spoilt baby every time they get misgendered, like, it's not that difficult to. And honestly, the best way is to kind of avoid most of this shit, like most of the news that, you know, there's a new bill going on in fucking Missouri and loads of trans people in the UK are fucking sawing out about it, like how dangerous it is, like how unsafe they feel. There's really, I mean, like, places I've worked and stuff, no one gave a shit that I was trans. Like, I worked in bars where I'd get some shit because it was that kind of clientele. And it just kind of toughened me up, honestly. I think more people should do it. If you're trans, right at the start of your transition, when you look the most awkward and the most weird, go work in a fucking bar in a right-wing area. Do it. Trust me. You'll feel like shit some of the time, but you'll toughen up. because you'll realize that what these fucking people say to you, it's really not the end of the world. Someone calls you a tranny. Okay, cool. Nice one. Like, I fucking barred people and they'd call me all the names under the sun. And it's like, well, you're still fucking barred. I'm still never going to have to see you again. It's fine. You mouth off as me as much as you want. And you can get on with your life. And you can, I mean, like, kind of office jobs I've done, people didn't give a shit that I was trans. Like, I'd be on the phone all the time. You know, I worked on the phone for like 5 years as one of my jobs. People almost never even realized I was trans from that. You know, and they can't even see me to try and work out what the fuck my gender is. I got misgendered maybe like a handful of times, like not even once a year, like less than that. And like no one ever gave me shit for using the women's bathroom. No one ever called me a man. Like even the people that I think probably had like anti-trans views, they didn't say anything to me. And that's all I care about. I don't care what people fucking say behind my back, because we're not going to be friends anyway. But yeah, you can get on with your life. You don't have to other yourself. You don't have to panic about every fucking thing that happens, because unfortunately, this is still an emerging issue. This is still shit that's going down, and we don't know what the future's going to hold yet. And I know so many people who drive themselves insane watching the news like a hawk, commenting on every single like anti-trans bill getting passed, often not even in our own countries. It makes me feel sad. Like, we're better than this. We should be better than this. We should be able to have conversations about literally anything. We should be able to get on with our lives. It kind of feels like the progressive trans don't want us to get on with our own lives and have to make a point of how like cis-normative or whatever it is that we insist on wanting to be seen as women because we're trans women, as opposed to whatever the fuck it is that we're supposed to want to be seen as. What was it someone told me? The gender binary is like removing our creativity beyond that. When it's like every other non-binary person I see is a woman with short hair that's been dyed, with tattoos and piercings, wearing some kind of men's clothes, I guess. They all look the fucking same to me. It's just like a third thing. Like, I just see kind of sea of grey at this point.
That's right.
And I just want you to leave me alone.
That's right. That it was this way 10 years ago. It
Yeah.
was this way 20 years ago. It's really been, in my view, a real disaster for trans rights to redefine it from a nonpartisan medical issue to this leftist fringe identity issue.
True.
Where you're trying.
I don't even think gender identities are a thing. I could be wrong. I think we all have our own self-identities, and what you think of with your gender probably comes into part of that. But these like defined, like, oh, did you know you can be cloud gender? Like stuff like that. It's obviously nonsense, but you can't talk about it because then you get a whole bunch of shit from your own people, supposedly. And it's just like, why bother? Why not just cut those people out of your life? You know? I don't know. It's something fucked about how so many of us can't be part of anything because we just don't think the right way. But that's what it is now, because we politicized it ourselves. Trans isn't political, it's politicized. Let's be clear about that. It's not political, it's politicized.
To destroy the idea of gender itself. Now, I want to be really clear. If someone's non-binary, I will do my best. I will call them by the pronouns that they want because I'm not a jackass. But that doesn't mean I agree with this idea of destroying gender in the public.
True, yeah. I'll try and do people's pronouns. I generally call people everything because I'm just shit, that kind of thing. Like, the connection between my brain and my mouth is just not that good. It's just how it is. But people are actually like super difficult about it, and people will like, there was so many, like the local space in my area, it's not there anymore, and it's arguably a good thing, but they still have some influence over people, unfortunately. But like, they'd push all this like, you know, be extremely entitled with your pronouns, with like your they them pronouns, like correct people like every time. Allies, you have to correct people every time, like even in private. And it's like, Jesus fuck, this is a heck of a lot of like entitlement for something that doesn't come out of your mouth. It comes out of other people's mouths towards you, not even towards you, about you. It's nuts. Honestly, fuck. Like, pronouns, just fuck it. Everyone gets whatever I call them. If it's wrong, I'll try and get it right. If you make it difficult for me to get it right, I'm just gonna not fucking bother with you. It's that simple.
Comments. That's not something I support. So, you know, I think the truth is we need to be able to have a discussion. And I think a lot of trans people that actually transition have been ironically censored from their own civil rights movement.
Yes, yes. Transsexual erasure is real. That should be, that's a shit slogan, and I hate slogans anyway. But it's real. It's real. Like, here's an example. I actually have something relevant to say. I'm not just rambling for once. So, like, pronoun circles, you know, the whole thing, you're sat with some people, you'll all go round in a circle and, like, introduce yourself with your name and your pronouns. Or, like, the way they want social situations to be, where everyone always says, hi, my name's Mary, my pronouns are she, her, what's your name and pronouns? As if that's ever going to catch on, as if that's ever going to become naturalized. It's not, I'm sorry. Like, for transsexual people like myself, that's extremely othering, because if I tell someone off the bat, my pronouns are she, her, I don't know if that person's calling me a she because they see me as one, or because I told them to. I don't want to tell people to call me that. I want people to infer that from looking at me and being around me. And it mostly happens. Like, I don't know what to tell people that are that sure that they clock people. It mostly happens. So, yeah, there's actually a fair amount of things where transsexuals and non-binaries, transgenders, whatever, are actually directly opposed. It's the same as there are certain ways in which trans rights directly oppose women's rights. Like, it's true. We can pretend it's not, but it's true.
And the discussion is the important part. And this is where the progressive taboos, and they really are progressive taboos, they have to be broken apart.
I agree.
We have to.
Yeah, wasn't LGBT about breaking taboos, like, before? Like, feminism as well, you know, taboos around female sexuality, and then, like, LGBT and so on. But now it's like we've got our own taboos, like, don't dare mention my birth sex, like, that's bigotry. Okay, yeah, it's correct. What this guy's saying is correct. Like, we can't pick and choose which taboos are right and which are wrong.
Be able to talk about the data, the evidence, without, you know, you're denying trans people's existence and all of this other nonsense.
Denying existence, yes, okay. When people say, if you don't accept my identity, you're denying my existence, that's bullshit. That's complete bullshit. It's a complete bullshit argument. No one is denying your existence by misgendering you, by not accepting your gender identity when you introduce yourself and say that you're autism gender. They're denying, well, they're disagreeing with your perception of yourself. They're not denying your existence. They're disagreeing with your self-perception. And I don't personally think that anyone has the right for everyone else to agree with their self-perception. My self-perception is that I'm not a right-winger, but I get called a fucking right-winger all the time on Twitter. Are those people denying my existence? I don't think they are. And I think they do have a right to say that, even if I think they're wrong. But it doesn't work the other way.
I agree. Did you read Emily Blaslan's, I don't know how you say it. It was a really great piece in the New York Times called The Battle for Gender Clinics or something. It was about children transitioning. I was so upset about this because it was such a deeply reported, amazing piece that was overwhelmingly pro-trans and was talking about the history of children transitioning.
Let me guess. It's overwhelmingly pro-trans, but there's like one or two things that weren't quite so pro-trans. So this person is now transphobic and cancelled, just like fucking Jesse Single or whatever.
And what the reality was in these gender clinics and the pros of it and the cons of it. And what did trans Twitter do? From open discussion from a reporter that was very, very sympathetic to that cause. They canceled her. They went after her in very personal ways. She had to step away from Twitter. It was absolute hell for her.
Isn't that the most like first world problems you've ever had in your life? Oh no, I had to step away from Twitter. It's true though, it's complete bullshit. Like, these harassment campaigns, we need to stop pretending like we're the fucking victims. Most of the time we're not.
If trans people cannot even let the New York Times write an article that is pro-trans healthcare and act like adults, I don't know how they're going to.
Well, the problem is, You used the word cons. You said that it mentioned cons. You can't say anything negative. Like, that's not acceptable. There can't be any negative perceptions. There can't be any, well, here's a potential problem with this. And yeah, it is childish. It's, what does she say exactly? One sec.
We're going to win trans healthcare and act like adults.
And act like adults, yeah. Because a lot of these people literally just are children in grown-up bodies. I don't know what I'm supposed to think other than that.
I don't know how they're going to win over normal people.
Well, they're not going to, are they? They're not going to win over anyone except their own people. These people just kind of speak to each other.
Brianna, do they want to win over normal people?
I don't think they do.
I think some do. I don't think a lot of the new ones do.
No.
Yeah, and that's... How are we going to have trans acceptance on a broad scale if we don't want to appeal to the average person? It's completely nuts. And they'll say things like trans liberation and stuff. What the fuck does trans liberation even mean? These are the same people who want socialism and want to have a revolution, which is also not going to happen. So at what point do we not start connecting the dots and realize how just completely full of shit and completely worthless these people are? And there's no point even dealing with them. Like, what are you supposed to say? This kind of tiny niche movement that wants to change the way gender works in a way that no one wants except them. And they don't want acceptance. And they've latched onto, like, the trans movement. What can you do except cut these fucking people off? There's no other choice at this point.
No.
And to me, that's the real problem.
I
They're
agree.
more interested in being right
I
than
agree.
winning people over.
I agree.
And
There's
when-
a lot of that going
Well, they don't even manage being right, so that's even more fucking worthless.
around, to be fair.
Yeah. And when you're in that position, I mean, that's a pretty terrible position to be in for everybody.
I agree.
Are they more interested in being right, or are they more interested in being what they consider, like, moral? I'm not sure.
It's so discouraging. I mean, it's, for me, I'm 46. I remember when
46, I was close. I said she was 47 earlier. Okay.
trans was Jerry Springer in this country. I don't know if you know who that was. And to
Yep.
think
Yep.
about that as
Jerry.
To
Yeah.
think about that era as just a healthier discussion. It's terrifying to
It's
think
amazing how
about.
we live in a world where Jerry Springer was a healthier discussion.
Tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's the Jerry Springer show. That's how it is. If there's not a fight on it, I don't know what's going on. I'm pretty sure they're all, like, actors. It's like wrestling, but instead it's random poor people, I guess. Whereas Jeremy Kyle was actually, like, I don't want to say it was actually real, but it was a little more real, shall we say.
Just
Yeah,
bring
yeah,
about
no.
10 crazies onto the stage and
Yeah.
make them fight. That was
Yeah,
healthy.
yeah, and then
This
it got
is-
broken up.
This is what I was thinking about. Like in the Jerry Springer era, like a trans woman being married to a man was salacious. And today it's boring because
Yeah.
half of trans Twitter is in their polycule with 5 non-binary people. Like it's insane.
Yeah, polyamory. One of many things. There's so many things that so many trans people have taken on that really have nothing to do with being trans. That how are we not supposed to see it as kind of culty when everyone I meet seems to be polyamorous and socialist, communist, or anarchist or whatever else? Like, there's so many, like, unifying factors. And people will bullshit us constantly saying there's not an ideology or whatever that this stems from. There's some kind of ideology in there. It's, oh man. Also, miss me with that poly shit. I'm not into fucking polyamory. Like, having one person around a lot is a little challenging for me. It's less challenging having someone around that I'm really fond of. And that's how my life is. So it's pretty great when you think about it. But, like, the thought of, like, trying to bring more people into that, like, living with me, like, fuck that shit. I don't know how people deal with... And these are all, like, autistic people, apparently. I don't know. I think we've changed the definition of autism to fit quite a lot of people, quite frankly.
So you mentioned the election that's obviously
Mhm.
looming in the future. you seem to think it's going to be close. You don't
Yeah.
know. You're not making a call either way.
Well, let me tell you why. So elections do not come down to vibes. They come down to get out the vote. So what I mean by get out the vote is you build a relational database of contacts that you have from canvassing or relational organizing, which is you literally pay people to go contact 100 of their friends on Facebook and make sure they'll get out and vote. And the Democrats' data strategy this time around has actually been pretty good. So when I'm looking at the infrastructure we are building for the ground game in these swing states, I actually feel pretty positive about it. So our messaging, I think I would give a D- to. Joe Biden's ability to go out and make a coherent vision for the country, I would give an F to. But these like bread and butter tools to win an election, I actually think we're doing much better than Trump is.
Brianna, I've got to ask this question.
Sure.
He's too old, isn't he?
Yeah. This is why I didn't vote for him in the primary.
Isn't Trump like a year or two younger than Biden? Why do they only do it one way? I think people say that Biden's a lot more senile, but I don't know. Either way, it's like 4 years. Like, how old are either of them going to be by then? It is a bit insane.
Likely in 2020.
What is going on when we have Trump or Biden? What is going on with the system? You've got this amazing
Do you
country.
think I can defend this? One of my closest friends, Cenk Uygur, ran for president because he saw this and believes Biden can't win. So I can't defend it. I mean, I've been very open. I wish he had dropped out and let someone else be the standard bearer. He didn't, and it's a really big risk, and now it's too late to do anything.
Who would you rather have run?
So y'all probably don't like her, but Elizabeth Warren, she's my senator in Massachusetts. I think she is amazing. She's the best in-person politician I've ever seen, works a room, really good policy. I would love to see her as president.
I don't know why you say we probably wouldn't like her. We're big fans of Native
We're
American.
just seeing this out at this point in case they say anything else, because, again, the election, I mean, I see what's going on. I don't know what's going to fucking happen. I even live there, so I don't know. How much can I...
Right.
How much can I go into it?
Well, I say that because...
I had to say that. Come on.
Fair enough. She is, she's gotten into some gender controversies, I think I would say.
Yeah, no, I think that actually, if you listen to some of the stuff that she says about economics, some of it I don't agree with, some of it I agree with, and she's definitely not one of these crazy. I'm not sure that she's the inspirational candidate that we'd all hope for. But no.
Okay, how about Ro Khanna? Do you know Ro Khanna?
I'm familiar, yeah.
Ro Khanna is a really good guy,
Yeah.
really smart, really policy focused, very focused. I think he would be an excellent president. We've got talent in the party. I think the problem is, and the Republicans have this issue too, there's a seniority system. So it's like, whose turn is it?
Right.
Whose favors can I call in?
So then you eventually end up with a bunch of old people.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, on that happy note, why don't we wrap up? We'll go to locals for questions from our audience. But before we do, Brianna, the last question, as you know, we always ask is, what's the one thing we're not talking about that we should be?
Before Brianna answers a final question at the end of the interview, make sure to head over to our locals. The link is in the description. Give it a click where you'll be able to see this. What argument does the right make that you agree with, but the left will never accept?
What does Brianna think of wokeness in games such as D&D?
It's so clear after October 7th, this isn't even about equality. It's about some people want power. What's the one thing we're talking about that we're not talking about? I think that something really scary is going on with young men. I saw this during Gamergate, and one of the mistakes I feel I made during Gamergate was treating these young men as if they were monsters. And I think the truth...
Yeah. There's like almost no messaging from the left to men other than stop raping, stop doing this, stop doing that. So like we're losing them. Isn't it like this generation, we're seeing a huge split where women are becoming more and more and more and more liberal, and then men are becoming more and more conservative, like young men, 18-year-olds and shit like that. But that's what's going to happen if you don't appeal to those people. And like, trans people are how much of the population? How much are men? 49% or whatever. It's crazy. But people don't seem to understand this. And I've been hearing other people say this kind of shit as well. It never seems to change though. Like misandry is pretty rife. Everything that I think about, it's like we sowed the seeds for this shit years ago and now we're starting to reap them and it's all shit now. It's great. What are you supposed to do about that,
Truth is, we have 2 generations of young men that are looking for a path, and they're lost and they're lonely. And Andrew Tate is talking to them in terms they understand, and the Democrats are not. So I think that...
so who are they going to listen to? When you've got all these fucking trans wokies and shit like that, shitting on men constantly, are they going to go to your side, or are they going to go to the fucking Andrew Tate side, like the red pill? By the way, the red pill, they strike me as being even more of a fucking thought cult than fucking trans people these days. Like the kind of rigidity with which they see like relationships is insane.
Just talking about we didn't get a chance to do this today. I think if the Democratic Party cannot figure out a way to, yes, talk about women's rights, talk about LGBT rights, stop telling men that they don't matter, I don't think we're going to win elections. So I think we need to get extremely serious about this.
Yeah, if
Truth-based.
you want to understand the slide generationally, my generation's male role model in the public, on the internet, is Jordan Peterson, who I think is a great guy. I've just been touring with him, so I would say that, but he's a great guy.
I'm not the biggest fan of Jordan Peterson, but he was right about a bunch of stuff. Like, you can't take that away from him.
A really, truly great man. And Gen Z's male role model is Andrew Tate.
That's right.
About whom I would definitely not say the same thing.
That's right. I always find Jordan Peterson really interesting.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson is a lot less egregious than him.
You know, I've talked about this a million times, but I have been sober for 20 years. So a lot of his struggles with, finding yourself addicted and trying to find a path back, I really identify with that. I've always wanted to talk to him about it.
Yeah, he's great. And what he's doing now is he's not really talking about the culture war or politics or anything. And I'm glad he's not. I think it's a great thing that he's doing, because he's talking to people about how to live a good life.
Yeah.
And he's telling them very powerful stories about some of the ways to do that. You don't have to believe in God or not or whatever. It's just a very powerful way of looking at the world and being constructive, productive, creative, passionate, driven, and living a good life and contributing to others.
Yeah.
That's a good role model. But I think that the fact that the next generation is leaning in a different direction tells you quite a lot about what young men are dealing with, what they're being told about who they are, what their role is in the world, and the way the economy is changing, and all of that. So I think it's a
really hard time to be a young man. I was, my husband, I've talked to him about this so much, like what it was like for him growing up and learning to be a man. Yeah, there were institutions there a generation ago. I don't think those exist today. I think we're throwing our young men online. I think they're not learning to interact with people in the real world. I think they're lonely. I think they're horny, and I think they're lost. We've talked a lot about how democracy survives from here. How can any country survive without young men and a path? Like, it can't. So, I really wish the Democrats would make it a project to find our public figures that can talk to those young men in honest ways and try to bring them in and come up with some public policy to make their lives better.
All right. Well, the 3 Democrats who were listening, thank you for being around. Take that to heart. And head on over to Locals, where we ask Brianna your questions.
All right, that looks like that is...
Are you worried you'll never find a way to reach those on your own side that see you as a